The blizzard had been raging for 3 days straight, turning the Alaskan wilderness into a frozen wasteland where visibility dropped to mere feet. Navy SEAL Marcus Chun pressed forward through the knee-deep snow, his breath forming ice crystals on his beard as he navigated the treacherous terrain. His mission was supposed to be a routine reconnaissance operation, gathering intelligence on suspected foreign activities near the remote military outpost. But nothing about this assignment felt routine anymore. The weather had forced his team to split up 12 hours ago when their helicopter was grounded by the storm. Marcus carried his radio, but the static-filled channels offered nothing but white noise. He was alone in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth, with temperatures dropping to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit and winds howling like banshees through the sparse pine trees. As he crested a small ridge, something caught his eye through the swirling snow. At first, he thought it might be a fallen tree or a large rock, but as he moved closer, his trained eyes recognized the unmistakable outline of a human form. His heart rate quickened as he dropped to one knee, scanning the area for potential threats before approaching the motionless figure. What he discovered made his blood run cold, but not from the Arctic temperatures. A woman in military uniform lay partially buried in the snow, her hands bound behind her back with military-grade zip ties. Her face was pale, lips tinged blue from the cold, but she was breathing. Barely. Next to her, equally still and covered in frost, lay a German shepherd, its thick coat providing some protection against the elements, but clearly suffering from exposure. Marcus immediately went into rescue mode, his SEAL training kicking in despite the shock of the discovery. He checked the woman's pulse, weak but steady. The dog stirred slightly when Marcus touched its fur, a good sign that it was still alive. Both victims appeared to have been in the snow for hours, maybe longer. The woman's uniform bore the insignia of a Navy officer, but what caught Marcus's attention was the quality of her gear and the specialized equipment scattered nearby. This wasn't some junior enlisted personnel caught in bad weather. The tactical vest, the advanced communication equipment, and the presence of the military working dog suggested this was someone important, someone with a high-level security clearance. Working quickly, Marcus cut the zip ties binding the woman's hands with his tactical knife. Her wrists were raw and bleeding from struggling against the restraints. As circulation returned to her arms, she began to stir, mumbling incoherently through cracked lips. The dog, sensing Marcus's presence, tried to lift its head but was too weak from the cold and exposure. Marcus knew he had to get them both to shelter immediately or they would die from hypothermia. But first, he needed to understand what had happened here. This wasn't an accident or a case of someone getting lost in the storm. Someone had deliberately bound this officer and left her to die in the wilderness. He quickly searched the immediate area, looking for clues about who might have done this and whether the perpetrators were still nearby. Footprints in the snow had been mostly covered by the blizzard, but he could make out signs of a struggle near a cluster of rocks about 50 yards away. Broken equipment and disturbed snow told the story of a violent encounter. The woman's eyes fluttered open as Marcus examined her for injuries. She tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper, her throat raw from the cold air. She seemed confused, disoriented, struggling to focus on his face. Marcus leaned closer, shielding her from the worst of the wind. "Ma'am, I'm a Navy SEAL. You're safe now. Can you tell me your name?" he asked, his voice calm and reassuring despite the urgency of the situation. She mouthed something he couldn't quite catch. Then her eyes rolled back and she lost consciousness again. The dog whimpered softly, trying to crawl closer to its handler despite its weakened state. Marcus could see the bond between them, even in these dire circumstances. Time was running out. Marcus made a quick decision. He couldn't wait for rescue or try to call for help in this weather. He had spotted what looked like an abandoned hunting cabin about a mile southeast during his approach. It would have to do as temporary shelter while he figured out next steps. He fashioned a makeshift travois using broken tree branches and paracord from his pack, creating a drag sled that could carry both the woman and the dog. The German Shepherd was too weak to walk, but seemed to understand that Marcus was trying to help, offering no resistance as he gently lifted it onto the improvised stretcher alongside its unconscious handler. As Marcus began the grueling journey toward the cabin, pulling his unexpected cargo through the deep snow, questions raced through his mind. Who was this woman? Why had someone tried to kill her in such a brutal fashion? And, most importantly, were the people responsible still out there in the storm, waiting to finish what they had started? The wind continued to howl around them as Marcus pressed forward, his muscles burning from the effort of dragging the sled through the snow. Behind him, the woman and dog remained unconscious, their breathing shallow but steady. Every few minutes, he would stop to check their vitals and adjust their position to prevent further heat loss. The abandoned cabin appeared through the blizzard like a mirage, its dark silhouette barely visible against the white landscape. Marcus had never been so relieved to see four walls and a roof. As he approached the structure, he could see that it was old but solid, with boarded-up windows and a heavy wooden door that hung slightly askew on its hinges. Breaking into the cabin was easy. The lock had long since rusted away. Inside, Marcus found exactly what he had hoped for: a stone fireplace, some basic furniture, and, most importantly, a stack of dry firewood left by previous occupants. The place smelled musty and hadn't been used in years, but it was shelter from the storm. Working with practiced efficiency, Marcus got a fire started and began the process of warming the cabin. He carefully moved the woman and dog closer to the fireplace, checking their breathing and pulse regularly. The German Shepherd's eyes opened briefly as the warmth began to reach them, and Marcus took that as an encouraging sign. As the fire crackled and the cabin slowly warmed, Marcus finally had a moment to really examine the woman he had rescued. She appeared to be in her late 20s or early 30s, with short dark hair and the lean, athletic build of someone who took physical fitness seriously. Her uniform was well-maintained and bore several ribbons indicating distinguished service. But it was a name tape on her uniform that made Marcus's blood freeze. The letters spelled out Harrison in clear military font. In Navy circles, that name carried significant weight. Admiral James Harrison was one of the most powerful and respected officers in the entire military command structure. If this woman was related to him, then Marcus had stumbled into something much bigger and more dangerous than he had initially realized. The implications began to sink in as Marcus continued his emergency medical care. Someone hadn't just attacked a random Navy officer. They had targeted someone with connections to the highest levels of military command. This was either a kidnapping gone wrong, an assassination attempt, or was something else entirely. As if reading his thoughts, the German Shepherd lifted its head and fixed Marcus with an intelligent stare. Military working dogs were not assigned randomly. They were paired with handlers based on security clearances, specialized training, and mission requirements. The presence of this particular dog suggested that Officer Harrison was involved in something classified, something important enough to warrant this level of protection. Marcus continued to tend to his unexpected patients as the storm raged outside, but his mind was already working through the tactical implications of his discovery. Somewhere out in that blizzard, dangerous people might be looking for the woman and dog he had just rescued. And until he could get them to safety and contact his command, Marcus was the only thing standing between them, and whoever had tried to kill them in the snow, the woman's eyes opened slowly as the warmth from the fireplace began to penetrate her frozen body. She blinked several times, trying to focus on Marcus's face as he knelt beside her, checking her pulse. When she tried to sit up, he gently pressed her back down. "Easy there, Officer Harrison. You've been through hell. Your body temperature is still too low for sudden movements," Marcus said, his voice calm and professional. "How do you know my name?" she whispered, her voice hoarse and barely audible. "Who are you?" "I'm Marcus Chun, Navy SEAL. I found you and your dog in the snow. Someone had tied you up and left you to die in the blizzard." Marcus handed her a cup of warm water he had heated by the fire. Can you tell me what happened? Lieutenant Commander Sarah Harrison tried to piece together the fragmented memories of the past day. The mission briefing, the helicopter flight to the remote research facility, the sudden attack that had come out of nowhere. Her head throbbed as she forced herself to remember details that might be crucial to their survival. I was leading a security inspection at Research Station Delta 7. She began slowly, taking small sips of the warm water. It's supposed to be a classified communications facility monitoring foreign submarine activity in the Arctic. But when we arrived, something was wrong. Her German shepherd, Rex, lifted his head and managed to crawl closer to Sarah, pressing his warm body against her side. The dog was weak, but alert, his intelligent brown eyes scanning the cabin for potential threats. Marcus noticed how the animal's presence seemed to calm Sarah, giving her strength to continue her story. The facility was operating, but not the way it should have been. The equipment I saw didn't match what was supposed to be there according to our briefing documents. Instead of monitoring stations, they had transmission equipment, powerful enough to reach anywhere in the world. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Arctic temperature. Unauthorized transmission equipment at a classified facility suggested espionage, possibly foreign intelligence operations being conducted on American soil. This was exactly the kind of security breach that could compromise national security on a massive scale. Who was supposed to be running the facility? Marcus asked, keeping his voice neutral while his mind raced through the implications. Colonel David Price. I've worked with him before on security assessments. He's always been professional, by the book. But when I started asking questions about the unauthorized equipment, he became evasive. Then his men surrounded me and Rex. Sarah's hands trembled as she continued, whether from the cold or the memory of betrayal. Marcus couldn't tell. Rex whimpered softly and nuzzled closer to his handler, sensing her distress. They said I had seen too much, that I was a threat to operational security. Price told his men to take us into the wilderness and make it look like we got lost in the storm. But first, they wanted information about my father's current assignment, his security protocols, his schedule. The pieces were falling into place for Marcus. This wasn't just about stopping a security inspection. Someone was using Sarah to get to Admiral Harrison. Her father's position would give him access to the highest levels of military intelligence, operational plans that foreign governments would pay millions to obtain. Did you give them any information about your father? Marcus asked gently. Nothing, Sarah said firmly, and Marcus could hear the steel in her voice despite her weakened condition. They left us in the snow when I refused to cooperate. Said the cold would make me more willing to talk when they came back. Marcus moved to the window and peered through a gap in the boards. The blizzard was still raging, but he could see that the snow was beginning to lighten slightly. More importantly, he thought he caught a glimpse of movement in the tree line about 300 yards away. We need to move, he said quietly, his SEAL training immediately shifting him into combat mode. I think your friends from the research station might have come looking for you. Sarah tried to sit up again, this time with more success. Rex and I can travel. We've been through worse training scenarios than this. Marcus wasn't entirely convinced, but he could see determination in her eyes that reminded him of her father's reputation for toughness. Admiral Harrison hadn't reached his position by backing down from difficult situations, and, apparently, his daughter had inherited that same fighting spirit. What's your assessment of the tactical situation at the research facility? Marcus asked as he began gathering their few supplies. At least 12 hostiles, all well-armed and coordinated. They had military-grade communication equipment and seemed to be following orders from someone with significant authority. This isn't some rogue operation. It's too well-organized, too well-funded. Marcus nodded grimly. A dozen trained operatives with military equipment would be formidable opponents even for a SEAL, especially when he was protecting 2 injured civilians in harsh weather conditions. But he had advantages too: superior training, knowledge of the terrain, and the element of surprise. There's an emergency cache about 5 miles from here, Marcus said, checking his GPS device. If we can reach it, we'll have better weapons, communication equipment, and medical supplies. From there, we can call for extraction. Sarah was already moving, testing her legs, and checking Rex's condition. The dog was weak, but mobile, his training and conditioning helping him overcome the effects of exposure. Military working dogs were bred for toughness, and Rex was proving worthy of his reputation. What kind of opposition can we expect between here and the cache? Sarah asked, slipping into the tactical mindset that had made her an effective officer despite her youth. Unknown. The terrain is mostly open with scattered tree cover. Normally that would favor us since we know where we're going, but in this weather, it's anyone's guess. The good news is that the blizzard will make it hard for them to track us. Marcus had been formulating a plan while they talked. The abandoned cabin had served its purpose as emergency shelter, but staying here any longer would be suicide. If Colonel Price's people had tracked them this far, they would eventually close in for the kill. We'll move in single file, stay low, use whatever cover we can find. Rex can help watch our back trail for pursuers. Are you up for this? Sarah nodded firmly. Rex, and I didn't survive 2 tours in Afghanistan to die in Alaska. We're ready. As they prepared to leave the relative safety of the cabin, Marcus couldn't help but admire Sarah's courage. Most people would have been broken by the betrayal and near-death experience she had endured, but she was already thinking tactically, ready to fight for their survival. The wind outside had died down slightly, but the snow continued to fall steadily. Marcus led the way, using his combat experience to navigate the treacherous terrain while keeping watch for signs of pursuit. Sarah followed, close behind, with Rex bringing up the rear, his keen senses alert for any danger approaching from their blind spots. They had been moving for about an hour when Rex suddenly stopped and growled low in his throat. Marcus immediately signaled for them to take cover behind a fallen log. In the distance, barely visible through the snow, 3 figures in winter camouflage were methodically searching the area they had just crossed. Professional search pattern, Sarah whispered. These guys know what they're doing. Marcus counted at least 6 more figures spread out in a wide line, all moving with military precision. Colonel Price wasn't taking any chances. He had committed significant resources to hunting them down. This confirmed Marcus's suspicion that they had stumbled into something much bigger than a simple rogue operation. Change of plans, Marcus said quietly. We can't outrun them in open terrain, and we're still too far from the cache. We need to thin their numbers. Sarah understood immediately. What do you need me to do? You and Rex circle around to the north and create a distraction. Nothing dangerous, just enough noise to draw some of them away from the main group. I'll take out the stragglers. It was a risky plan, but Marcus knew they couldn't simply run and hide. These pursuers were too well trained and too determined. Their only chance was to turn the tables and become the hunters instead of the hunted. As Sarah and Rex melted into the swirling snow, Marcus felt a familiar calm settle over him. This was what he had been trained for. Asymmetric warfare against superior numbers in hostile terrain. The cold, the exhaustion, the odds against them, none of that mattered now. He had people to protect and a mission to complete. The first hostile operative never knew what hit him. The distraction worked perfectly. Sarah and Rex created just enough commotion on the northern flank to draw 4 of the pursuers away from the main search line. Marcus moved like a ghost through the snow, using every piece of cover the wilderness provided. His years of SEAL training had taught him how to become invisible, even in broad daylight. The first operative was scanning the area where Marcus and Sarah had taken shelter earlier. He never heard the SEAL approach from behind. Marcus's combat knife found its target silently, and the man dropped into the snow without a sound. One down, at least 7 to go. Marcus quickly stripped the dead man of his weapons and communication equipment. The rifle was a high-end military assault weapon, and the radio crackled with coordinated chatter between the search teams. What he heard made his blood run cold. Alpha Team, Report status on the Harrison package. Came a voice with a slight accent that Marcus couldn't quite place. Still searching, Command. No sign of the targets since the cabin. The team leader responded. Negative on extended search. We have a narrow window before the Admiral security detail realizes his daughter is missing. Clean up any witnesses and extract a secondary location. Marcus's jaw tightened. These weren't just rogue military personnel. They were foreign operatives with inside information about Admiral Harrison's family and security protocols. Someone high up in the chain of command was feeding them intelligence, making this a matter of national security that went far beyond Sarah's interrupted inspection. He quickly moved to intercept the second isolated operative, a woman with short blonde hair who was methodically checking a cluster of rocks about 50 yards away. She was good, very good, but Marcus had been doing this longer. When she turned to key her radio, Marcus struck. Two down, he whispered to himself, appropriating her gear as well. Now he had enough firepower to make their pursuers think twice about continuing the hunt. The radio chatter was becoming more urgent. The team leaders had lost contact with two of their people and were tightening their search pattern. Marcus knew he had maybe 10 minutes before they realized their teammates weren't just dealing with radio problems. Sarah and Rex appeared through the snow like phantoms, moving with the practiced stealth of combat veterans. Rex was limping slightly, but his eyes were bright and alert. Sarah carried a fallen branch that she had been using to create false tracks and confuse trails. "How many did you get?" she asked quietly, noting the extra weapons Marcus carried. "Two, but we've got bigger problems. These people aren't American military. They're foreign operatives with inside intelligence about your father's security arrangements." Sarah's face went pale. Dad's scheduled to testify before Congress next week about Arctic defense strategies. If someone's compromised his security protocols, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus understood the implications immediately. Admiral Harrison would be vulnerable to assassination or kidnapping, and his testimony could be manipulated or suppressed to serve foreign interests. "We need to reach that weapons cache and get communication with my command," Marcus said. "This is way beyond what either of us can handle alone." They had started moving again when Rex suddenly went rigid, his ears pricked forward. The dog had detected something that human senses couldn't pick up yet. Marcus immediately dropped to one knee and signaled for silence. Through the falling snow, the faint sound of helicopter rotors became audible. But instead of relief, Marcus felt a spike of alarm. Military helicopters didn't typically operate in weather this severe unless it was an absolute emergency. And given what they had learned about the extent of this conspiracy, he couldn't assume that any aircraft was necessarily friendly. "False flag," Sarah whispered, reading his thoughts. "Possibly. We stay hidden until we know for sure." The helicopter was a military transport, but as it circled their general area, Marcus noticed something that confirmed his suspicions. The aircraft bore American markings, but the search pattern it was flying was wrong for a rescue mission. They were hunting, not rescuing. "That's not a rescue bird," Marcus said grimly. "They're trying to box us in." The helicopter settled into a hover pattern about half a mile away, and within minutes, Marcus could see armed figures fast roping down from the aircraft. Professional insertion techniques, military equipment, but something about their movements suggested they weren't American Special Forces. 12 more hostiles, Sarah counted, watching through a small pair of binoculars she had found in the gear Marcus had recovered. "These guys are definitely foreign military, probably Spetsnaz or similar special operations." Marcus felt the tactical situation shifting rapidly. 24 hostile operatives with air support and advanced equipment against one SEAL and 2 injured companions in the middle of an Alaskan wilderness. The odds were becoming impossible. "New plan," he said, checking his GPS one more time. "There's a secondary cache about 3 miles northeast. It's smaller, but it has communication equipment that can reach SEAL Command directly on encrypted channels. Can we make it before they establish a complete perimeter?" Sarah asked. "Not all of us," Marcus admitted. "Someone's going to have to stay behind and slow them down." Sarah immediately understood what he was suggesting. No, Rex and I aren't leaving you to face 24 hostiles alone. This isn't about heroics, Marcus replied firmly. This is about completing the mission. Your father needs to know his security has been compromised, and my command needs to understand the scope of this operation. That information is more important than any of our individual lives. Rex whimpered softly and pressed closer to Sarah, as if sensing the tension in the conversation. The dog's loyalty to his handler was absolute, but Marcus could see intelligence in the animal's eyes that suggested Rex understood the gravity of their situation. There might be another option, Sarah said slowly. When I was at the research facility, I noticed they had automated systems that could be accessed remotely. If we can get close enough to transmit the right codes, we might be able to turn their own equipment against them. Marcus considered the possibility. Military communication arrays were typically hardened against outside interference, but if Sarah had observed security weaknesses during her inspection, they might be able to exploit them. What kind of access would we need? Physical proximity to their main transmission array, maybe 200 yards, and about 10 minutes of uninterrupted time to upload a virus I can construct from basic programming protocols. It was incredibly risky. Getting within 200 yards of a hostile military installation would require them to penetrate layered security while being actively hunted by superior forces. But if Sarah could disable their communication systems, it might level the playing field enough for Marcus to complete his mission. Can you do it with the equipment we have available? Sarah nodded confidently. Rex and I have dealt with similar systems before, but we'll need you to provide overwatch and security while we work. The helicopter was getting closer, its search pattern tightening around their position. Marcus made a command decision that would either save their lives or get them all killed. We go for the research station. It's the last place they'll expect us to show up, and if we can compromise their communications, we might be able to call in real help. As they began moving toward what was essentially an enemy fortress, Marcus couldn't help but think about the irony of their situation. A routine reconnaissance mission had turned into a rescue operation, which had now become a counterintelligence mission with implications for national security. Sarah moved with renewed purpose, her earlier exhaustion forgotten in the face of a tactical challenge. Rex seemed to understand that they were no longer running from danger, but moving toward it, and his training as a military working dog made him the perfect companion for what they were about to attempt. The research station appeared through the snow like a collection of modern military buildings surrounded by sophisticated detection equipment. Marcus counted at least 8 guards on the perimeter, all armed with automatic weapons and thermal imaging gear. Security patterns? He asked Sarah, who had observed the facility during her original inspection. Patrol routes change every 30 minutes, but there's a blind spot on the eastern approach where the terrain drops into a ravine. They probably think it's impassable in this weather. Marcus smiled grimly. What the enemy considered impassable, SEALs called Tuesday morning training. As they prepared to infiltrate the heavily guarded facility, he felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with impossible odds and vital missions. Behind them, the search teams were closing in. Ahead lay a fortified position held by foreign operatives conducting espionage operations on American soil. Between those forces and their escape was a narrow window of opportunity that would require perfect timing, flawless execution, and more than a little luck. But Marcus had been in worse situations before, and this time he had partners who understood the stakes and were willing to risk everything to protect their country's secret. The infiltration of Research Station Delta 7 required every ounce of skill Marcus had developed during his SEAL career. The ravine Sarah had identified was treacherous, filled with loose rocks and hidden ice patches that could send an unwary climber tumbling to their death. But it also provided complete concealment from the sophisticated sensors protecting the facility. Rex proved invaluable during the approach, his keen senses alerting them to patrol movements they couldn't see through the swirling snow. The dog's training allowed him to communicate silently with Sarah through subtle body language, passing information about guard positions and timing that would have been impossible to obtain otherwise. "Two guards at the eastern perimeter fence," Sarah whispered, reading Rex's signals. "They'll rotate in approximately 12 minutes, based on the pattern I observed earlier." Marcus nodded, checking his improvised equipment one final time. The weapons he had taken from the eliminated operatives would give him enough firepower to create a diversion, but success would depend entirely on timing and precision. They would have one chance to get this right. As they waited for the guard rotation, Marcus used the time to study the research facility's layout. What Sarah had described as a communication monitoring station was clearly something much more sophisticated. The array of transmission equipment visible through the fence could reach satellites, submarines, or ground stations anywhere in the world. This was a command and control facility capable of coordinating large-scale intelligence operations. "There," Sarah breathed, pointing to a maintenance building near the main transmission array. "That structure houses the primary servers and control systems. If I can access those computers, I can upload a virus that will shut down their entire network." "How long do you need once you're inside?" 8 to 10 minutes for the upload, maybe 2 more to ensure it propagates through their entire system. Marcus calculated angles, distances, and timing in his head. 12 minutes to neutralize guards, penetrate the perimeter, provide security while Sarah worked, and then extract before the alarm brought overwhelming force down on their position. It was barely possible, which in SEAL terms meant it was doable. "Rex stays with me," Marcus decided. "I'll need his senses to watch for approaching hostiles while you work. Can you operate the computer systems without him?" Sarah hesitated for a moment. Rex had been her partner for 3 years, and they had never been separated during a combat operation. But she understood the tactical necessity. "He'll be more useful watching your back," she agreed. "Just remember, he responds to hand signals if you can't speak." The guard rotation happened exactly when Sarah predicted. Marcus moved with the fluid grace of a predator, neutralizing both sentries before they could raise an alarm. Rex followed close behind, his padded paws making no sound on the frozen ground. Penetrating the perimeter fence was easier than expected. The facility's designers had relied too heavily on electronic sensors, and not enough on simple physical barriers. Marcus cut through the chain link with bolt cutters taken from one of the guards, creating an opening just large enough for Sarah to slip through. "Go," he whispered urgently. "I'll maintain overwatch from here." Sarah sprinted across the open ground between the fence and the maintenance building, her movements quick and sure despite the icy surface. She had the building's door open and was inside within 30 seconds. Marcus settled into a defensive position with Rex beside him, both of them watching for any sign that their infiltration had been detected. The German Shepherd proved to be an exceptional sentry. His ears twitched at sounds Marcus couldn't hear, and twice he alerted to movement that turned out to be additional guards conducting unscheduled patrols. Each time, Marcus was able to avoid detection because of Rex's early warning. Inside the maintenance building, Sarah was working with the focused intensity of a combat engineer defusing a bomb. The computer systems were more sophisticated than she had expected, with multiple layers of security and encryption. But her training in cyber warfare served her well as she navigated through password protections and firewall defenses. What she found in the system files confirmed their worst fears. Research Station Delta 7 wasn't just conducting surveillance. It was the command center for a network of foreign intelligence operations spanning the entire Arctic region. Submarine movements, military communications, satellite coverage patterns, even the personal schedules of high-ranking American officers were all cataloged in the database. Her father's name appeared multiple times in the files, along with detailed information about his upcoming congressional testimony and his personal security arrangements. Someone with high-level access had been feeding information to foreign intelligence services for months, possibly years. "Come on, upload faster," Sarah muttered, watching progress bars crawl across the screen as her virus propagated through the network. The malicious code she had designed would not only shut down their communication systems, but also corrupt their stored intelligence files, destroying years of espionage work. Outside, Marcus was beginning to feel the pressure of time. Rex had alerted to increased activity around the main facility buildings, suggesting that someone might have noticed the missing perimeter guards. They had maybe 5 more minutes before their presence would be discovered. How much longer? Marcus whispered into the small radio Sarah carried. 3 minutes for the upload. Another 2 to complete the corruption sequence. Marcus did quick math in his head. 5 minutes was cutting it very close, but they might just make it if Flux stayed on their side. Then, Rex suddenly went rigid, his ears pricked forward in the unmistakable pose of a dog detecting immediate danger. Through the snow, Marcus could see armed figures moving toward their position. Not guards conducting routine patrols, but a coordinated assault team responding to a security breach. Someone had discovered the missing sentries, and they were conducting a systematic search of the entire perimeter. Contact in 30 seconds. Marcus warned Sarah over the radio. Whatever you're doing, finish it now. Almost done. The virus is uploading to their satellite communication array. This will shut down their entire network. Marcus checked his ammunition and prepared for what would likely be his final firefight. Against 6 or 7 trained operatives with automatic weapons, his chances were poor. But if Sarah could complete her mission, the intelligence value would justify the risk. The first hostile operative appeared through the snow like a ghost, moving with the careful precision of a professional soldier. Marcus let him get within 20 yards before taking a shot. The man dropped instantly, but his death cry alerted the others to Marcus's position. What followed was a brief but intense firefight that tested every aspect of Marcus's combat training. Rex proved invaluable, using his speed and agility to flank the enemy positions while Marcus provided covering fire. The dog's attack on one of the operatives created enough chaos for Marcus to eliminate 2 more before they could coordinate their response. Done. Sarah's voice crackled over the radio. The virus has corrupted their entire intelligence database and shut down their satellite links. They're completely blind. Marcus was down to his last magazine when Sarah emerged from the maintenance building. She immediately assessed the tactical situation and began providing suppressing fire with a weapon she had found inside the facility. Her marksmanship was excellent, forcing the remaining hostiles to take cover and disrupting their assault. "Extract route?" she asked, dropping prone beside Marcus as bullets whined overhead. "Same way we came in, but we need to move fast. That helicopter will be here as soon as they realize what happened." The withdrawal from the research station required every bit of skill and luck they could muster. Rex led the way, using his superior senses to guide them around patrol positions and through the maze of detection equipment. The virus Sarah had uploaded was already taking effect. Electronic systems throughout the facility were shutting down or displaying error messages as their network collapsed. As they reached the relative safety of the ravine, Marcus could hear the helicopter approaching. But without their communication systems, the enemy's coordination was breaking down. Confused voices shouted orders in multiple languages as the sophisticated facility transformed into chaos. "Phase 1 complete," Sarah said, breathing heavily from the exertion of their escape. "But now we need to get this information to people who can act on it." Marcus nodded, already planning their next move. They had dealt a significant blow to the foreign intelligence operation, but the larger conspiracy remained intact. Somewhere in the American military command structure, someone was still feeding information to enemy agents. The weapons cache he had mentioned earlier was still their best chance for establishing secure communication with SEAL Command. But the route would take them through territory that their enemies knew well, and they would be expecting exactly this kind of move. As they began the treacherous journey through the Alaskan wilderness, Rex trotting steadily beside them despite his exhaustion, Marcus reflected on how much the mission had changed since he had first spotted Sarah and her dog in the snow. What had started as a simple rescue had evolved into a counterintelligence operation with implications that reached the highest levels of government. Behind them, Research Station Delta 7 was dark and silent, its sophisticated espionage operations crippled by Sarah's cyber attack. But ahead lay even greater challenges as they raced to expose the conspiracy before Admiral Harrison walked into what could be a carefully orchestrated trap. The storm was finally beginning to clear, which meant better visibility for travel, but also increased danger from air surveillance. Marcus knew their window of opportunity was closing rapidly. They had struck a significant blow against the enemy, but now came the most difficult part, getting their intelligence to people who could act on it before the conspiracy adapted to their interference. Rex suddenly stopped and growled low in his throat, alerting them to movement in the distance. Through the clearing snow, Marcus could see figures moving in their direction. The hunt was far from the weapons cache was exactly where Marcus's intelligence had indicated, buried beneath a camouflage shelter that blended seamlessly with the surrounding forest. But accessing it required precious time they might not have, especially with hostile forces closing in from multiple directions. "How many?" Sarah asked as Rex continued his low growling, his senses picking up movement through the clearing storm. "At least 8, maybe more," Marcus replied, using his scope to scan the terrain. "They're using professional search formations, probably the helicopter insertion team we saw earlier." Sarah quickly helped Marcus clear snow from the cache entrance, while Rex maintained watch. Inside the underground storage facility, they found exactly what they needed: advanced communication equipment, additional weapons, medical supplies, and, most importantly, a satellite uplink capable of reaching SEAL Command on secure frequencies. "Get that radio operational," Marcus instructed as he selected more powerful weapons from the cache. "I'll try to buy us time to transmit our intelligence." But as Sarah began setting up the communication equipment, Rex's behavior changed dramatically. Instead of alert wariness, the dog suddenly showed signs of recognition, his tail beginning a cautious wag. Marcus immediately went to high alert. Rex had detected something familiar, possibly friendly. Through the snow came a voice speaking in clear American English. "SEAL operative, this is Colonel Patricia Walsh, U.S. Army Rangers. We're here for extraction. Identify yourself." Marcus hesitated. After everything they had discovered about foreign operatives with inside intelligence, trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. But Rex's positive reaction suggested these might actually be friendly forces. "Prove it," Marcus called back. "What's the current authentication code for Arctic operations?" "Frostbite 77 Delta," came the immediate reply. "And if you're Marcus Chun, your last mission report was filed from Coronado Base on November 15th. Sarah looked up from the radio equipment. That information would only be available to someone with legitimate access to SEAL operational records. Marcus made a calculated decision. "Moving to your position for visual confirmation. We have priority intelligence regarding compromised security at the highest levels." The team that emerged from the tree line was unmistakably American military. 8 Army Rangers in full combat gear, moving with the disciplined precision of elite troops. Colonel Walsh herself was a compact woman with the weathered face of a career soldier and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. "Mr. Chun, Lieutenant Commander Harrison," she said, nodding to each in turn. "We've been searching for you since your helicopter was reported missing. Admiral Harrison has been extremely concerned about his daughter." Sarah stepped forward, Rex at her side. "Colonel, how did you know to look for us here?" "This cache location is classified." Walsh's expression grew serious. "Because we've been tracking the same foreign intelligence operation you stumbled into. Research Station Delta 7 has been under surveillance by Army intelligence for the past 6 months. When their communications went dark earlier today, we knew someone had finally moved against them." Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place. "You knew about the espionage operation? Why wasn't it shut down earlier?" "Because we were using it to feed false information back to their handlers," Walsh explained. "We've been tracking the network, identifying all the players before rolling up the entire conspiracy. Your interference forced us to accelerate our timeline." Sarah looked up from the communication equipment, which was now fully operational. "I need to warn my father immediately. They have detailed intelligence about his security arrangements, and his congressional testimony. Already handled, Walsh said with satisfaction. Admiral Harrison's testimony has been postponed, and his security detail has been tripled. We've also been feeding false information through the compromise channels, leading the conspiracy to focus on the wrong targets. Marcus began to understand the scope of the operation they had inadvertently become part of. How long has this been running? 18 months. We identified the first compromised communication at a facility in Greenland, then tracked the network as it spread to installations across the Arctic. The research station you hit was their primary coordination hub. Rex suddenly alerted again, but this time his body language suggested vehicles approaching rather than hostile foot patrols. Within minutes, the sound of helicopter rotors became audible through the clearing air. Walsh keyed her radio and spoke in military code that Marcus recognized as extraction coordination. The conspiracy runs deeper than you might realize, Walsh continued as they prepared for evacuation. We've identified foreign agents in positions ranging from base security personnel to mid-level officers with access to operational planning. Your father's intelligence network has been compromised for over a year, Lieutenant Commander. Sarah's face went pale as the implications sank in. Every mission, every operation Dad has been involved in, they've known about it in advance. Which is why your accidental discovery and the intelligence you've gathered today is so valuable, Walsh replied. The virus you uploaded to their systems has given us access to their complete network architecture. We can now identify every compromised position and every foreign agent in the network. The extraction helicopter appeared through the clearing clouds, a military transport with full escort support. As they prepared aboard, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of completion that rarely came with SEAL operations. They had not only survived against impossible odds, but had also contributed to exposing a conspiracy that threatened national security. What happens to Colonel Price and the operatives at the research station? Sarah asked as they climbed aboard the helicopter. Price is already in custody, Walsh replied. When their communication network went down, we moved against all identified cells simultaneously. We've rolled up 17 foreign agents and 6 compromised American personnel in the past 4 hours. Rex settled beside Sarah in the helicopter, finally able to relax for the first time since their ordeal began. The dog's loyalty and training had been crucial to their survival, and Marcus made a mental note to ensure that Rex received appropriate recognition for his service. As the helicopter lifted off from the Alaskan wilderness, Marcus looked down at the terrain where they had fought for their lives against overwhelming odds. The storm was clearing completely now, revealing the stark beauty of the Arctic landscape. It was hard to believe that such a peaceful-looking wilderness had been the setting for an espionage operation that could have changed the balance of power in the region. Will this end the threat to Arctic security? Marcus asked Colonel Walsh. This network, yes, but there will be others. The Arctic is becoming increasingly important strategically, and foreign powers will continue trying to gain intelligence advantages. Operations like this are probably just the beginning. Sarah was already thinking ahead to the implications for her father and his work. Dad will need to know about every detail of this operation. The security protocols for Arctic operations will have to be completely overhauled. Admiral Harrison has been briefed on everything we know, Walsh assured her. He's actually the one who authorized this extraction mission when we realized you had been captured. He wanted his daughter brought home safely, but he also recognized the intelligence value of what you had discovered. The helicopter banked toward the south, carrying them away from the scene of their struggle and toward safety. Marcus felt the familiar sense of mission accomplishment that came at the end of successful operations, but he also understood that this had been something special, a perfect convergence of training, courage, and luck that had allowed them to survive and complete an almost impossible mission. Rex lifted his head and looked out the helicopter window as if taking one last look at the wilderness where he and his handler had proven themselves under the most extreme conditions. The bond between them had been tested by betrayal, exposure, and combat, but it had emerged stronger than ever. As they flew toward debriefing and the complex aftermath of exposing a major espionage network, Sarah reached over and scratched Rex behind his ears. "Good boy," she said quietly. "We made it home." Marcus smiled, understanding that for all the sophisticated equipment, military training, and tactical expertise that had been required for their survival, the most important elements had been simpler: loyalty, determination, and the refusal to give up even when the odds seemed impossible. The helicopter disappeared into the clearing Arctic sky, carrying 3 survivors whose chance encounter in a blizzard had helped expose one of the most significant foreign intelligence operations in recent military history. Behind them, the wilderness returned to its ancient silence, keeping the secrets of what had transpired in its frozen depths. In Washington, D.C., Admiral Harrison received a secure communication confirming that his daughter was safe and that the conspiracy threatening Arctic security had been neutralized. But he also understood that the price of freedom required constant vigilance, and that heroes sometimes emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, including a SEAL who found a bound officer and her dog in the snow, unaware that he was about to become part of something much larger than a simple rescue mission.